The wedding planner's studio was white linen and soft lighting, the kind of room designed to make everything feel elegant. I had driven 40 minutes to be there, pressed my best blazer the night before, and arrived exactly on time holding coffee I hadn't touched. Emily was already seated. So were her bridesmaids, Kayla, Britt, and Tara. The planner, Vivian, sat at the head of the table. I found a chair and sat quietly. Kayla smiled at me. The others looked at their phones. Emily didn't look up. The meeting started. Vivian walked through florals and table layouts. I leaned forward when she mentioned the rehearsal dinner and started to ask about the timeline. That was when Emily looked at me. Her voice was calm, almost bored. "Mom, I need you to understand something." She set her pen down. "You're a little embarrassing to have around. It might be better if you just sat quietly at the wedding. Actually, we haven't fully decided if you're attending at all." The room went completely still. I didn't speak. I nodded slowly and looked back at the table. But across the room, I noticed the fiancé, Daniel Carter, sitting quietly in the corner, watching. Something about him felt very familiar. I drove home without the radio on. I always had the radio on, but I needed the silence that night, the space to hold what had happened and let it settle somewhere it wouldn't break me. I had raised Emily alone since she was 4. Her father had left, and I had simply kept going, 2 jobs at one point, night classes, every school play, and parent-teacher conference and skin, knee, and heartbreak I had shown up for. Alone, without complaint. And she had looked at me across that white linen table and told me I was embarrassing. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to fight. I wasn't going to call her in tears. I was going to step back, quietly and completely, and let her run her wedding the way she wanted. I went inside. I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table and checked my work emails, a habit I couldn't break. Then I stopped. There was a name in my inbox. Daniel Carter. Performance review request. Forwarded from HR. I set my mug down very carefully. I was a senior division director at Hargrove Financial. 6 years in that role. Before that, 12 years climbing a structure that didn't make climbing easy for women. My division handled commercial lending operations. 43 employees across 3 departments. I knew every name, every file, every performance record. I had not connected Daniel Carter to my workplace because at family dinners I had paid more attention to whether Emily seemed happy than to what he did for work. She had said he was in finance. I had not asked which company. The next morning I pulled his file. Daniel Carter, mid-level manager. Loans processing and oversight. 3 years with the company. Being considered for a senior manager promotion that would put him directly in my reporting chain. His directory photo looked back at me. The man from the corner of the wedding planner's room. The one who had watched while my daughter told me I was too embarrassing to include. He had no idea I existed as anything other than Emily's mother. He had no idea I was about to become one of the most important people in his professional life. I sat with that for a moment. Then I opened his file. The file was thorough on the surface. Organized tabs, numbered metrics, tidy timestamps. But I had been reading performance files for nearly 20 years. I knew the difference between a record that told a real story and one arranged to tell a flattering one. 3 projects in the past year carried Daniel's name in the summary headers, flagged as successful outcomes under his leadership. When I pulled supporting documentation, work logs, team contribution records, internal emails, the picture shifted. The projects had been completed largely by a junior analyst named Wyatt and a small team Daniel had nominally supervised. The results were real. The attribution was stretched. It wasn't falsification exactly. It was the kind of credit claiming that happened in corporate environments, especially among people who understood how to manage upward perception while distributing actual effort downward. I flagged nothing. I made no notes in the system. I had no reason to act yet, and every reason to be careful about my own objectivity. He was going to marry my daughter. I had to be absolutely certain I was seeing what was actually there, and not what the evening in that white linen room had made me want to see. I closed the file. And I began to watch. Emily called the following Thursday. Not to apologize. To ask for money. She launched in within 90 seconds. Venue upgrade. Florist change. The caterer had raised their minimum. She needed 20,000 more than the 30 I had already committed. I listened to the full explanation before I spoke. That brings my total to 50,000, I said. The wedding is 60. Daniel's family is covering the rest. We need you to cover your part. Nothing in her voice acknowledged the meeting at Vivian's studio. Just the transaction, laid out cleanly. All right, I said. And Mom, please don't make this weird. Just contribute and let us handle the planning. You have a tendency to want to be involved, and this is our wedding. You have a tendency to want to be involved. I thought about the school plays, the 2 a.m. calls from college, the time I drove 4 hours through an ice storm because she was sick and had no one else. Understood, I said. I transferred the money that afternoon. I did not tell her where I worked. I did not mention the name in my inbox. I went to bed that night and lay in the dark thinking about all the things I was not saying and why. The quarterly leadership meeting happened on a Wednesday in March. I ran them myself. All senior managers above a certain level were expected to present performance updates and respond to questions from me and the other division directors. Daniel Carter walked into that room the way people walk into rooms they believe they own. Jacket pressed, hair neat, a confident posture that looked very much like the real thing. I was seated at the head of the table. He did not register my face for 3 full seconds. Then recognition landed, slowly, like a ship finding a dock. He recovered quickly. His expression smoothed in under a second. I gave no indication anything about this moment was unusual. He presented his update, loan processing turnaround times, default rate trends, 2 new vendor relationships his team had established in Q1. It was polished. He spoke in the cadence of someone who had rehearsed, using language that sounded specific without containing many specifics. When I asked a direct question about one of the vendor contracts, terms, liability structure, renewal provisions, he gave me a general answer. He did not know the details. He had not expected to be asked. I noted that and moved on to the next presenter. After the meeting, I caught a quiet word with Marcus Webb, a senior analyst 11 years with the company, 2 of them in Daniel's department before a lateral transfer. What's your read on Carter? I asked. He took a small breath. Very good at the presentation layer. The quarterly numbers always look clean. And underneath? His team is solid. Wyatt especially. Carter's smart enough to let them work and take the output. When something goes sideways, the accountability tends to land on whoever is closest to the problem, not whoever made the call. He paused. There was a client escalation about 18 months ago. The resolution was fine. But nobody figured out how the original error happened because Carter redirected the post-mortem very efficiently. Has this happened more than once? Twice, clearly. A few other moments I've wondered about, he said. I thanked him and returned to my office. I sat at my desk thinking about Emily, about how she had agreed with everything Daniel suggested at the last family dinner. The slight pause before she spoke. The way she had glanced at him before answering a question I had asked her directly. It could have been nothing. It probably wasn't. I had raised a confident child. Emily at 7 had argued with her teacher about a word pronunciation and been right. At 16, she had organized her school's first student-led climate committee. At 23, she had moved to a new city, knowing nobody, and built a full life within a year. She did not hesitate before speaking. That was not something she had learned from me. Except at that family dinner, she had. Twice, a half-second pause, a glance at Daniel before answering a question I had asked her directly. It could have been nothing. Couples develop rhythms. But Marcus's words sat with me. A man who managed upward carefully. Who let accountability slide away when things went wrong. Very good at the presentation layer. I was not ready to name what I was worried about. But I paid closer attention at the next family dinner. And the one after. Daniel was charming at those dinners. He told good stories and asked thoughtful questions and complimented the food sincerely. He also interrupted Emily 4 times over the course of a 2-hour dinner. The gentle, confident interruption of someone who had decided he was the authority in the room and expected no one to disagree. The family dinner in April was at Emily's apartment. She had made pasta from scratch, which she did when she was trying to impress someone or calm herself down. Daniel had brought nothing, Though he accepted credit smoothly when my father complimented the table setting Emily had clearly arranged herself. I watched. It wasn't one thing. It was an accumulation of small things. He redirected the conversation when Emily started a story, finishing it in a way that subtly changed the point. He touched her elbow when she started to disagree with something, and she stopped and softened. When she went to the kitchen, he explained to us what she had meant about something she had said perfectly clearly. After dinner, on the balcony, Emily mentioned a job opportunity she was excited about, a senior role at a nonprofit. Daniel said, smiling, "She's still thinking about it. It's a big change." Emily hadn't said she was still thinking about it. She had said she was excited. I said nothing, but I understood, quietly, that something important was happening to my daughter. The complaint came through on a Monday in late April, forwarded by my HR business partner, flagged as a matter within my division. A junior analyst named Patricia had submitted a formal concern about project attribution. She had led the data analysis on a client report. The final submission carried Daniel's name as lead contributor, with her work folded under a general team footnote. It wasn't the first time she had raised the issue. According to the HR record, she had mentioned it informally twice before and nothing had been addressed. I read the file twice. Then I looked out my office window for a moment. This was not about Emily. This was an employee in my division who believed her work had been misrepresented. She deserved a fair, thorough, and completely professional response. I called my HR business partner and opened a formal review process. I did not mention Daniel's personal situation to anyone. I did not tell Emily. I did not allow myself to think about the wedding or the $20,000 I had transferred without a thank you. I ran the process the way I always ran the process. Whatever I felt personally had no place inside these walls. That was a line I had always held. I held it now. Over 3 weeks, I reviewed every document Patricia had flagged. I spoke separately with 4 team members. I reviewed email chains and file version histories. I conducted a structured interview with Daniel, procedural, documented, giving him full opportunity to respond. He was composed, thoughtful in his answers. He acknowledged Patricia's contributions warmly and called the attribution a formatting oversight he was happy to correct. It was a skilled performance, and it confirmed what I had been observing since I first pulled his file. Daniel Carter was exceptionally good at managing perception when he knew he was being evaluated. The problem was that 4 junior team members had independently described the same pattern, work redirected, credit flowing upward after the fact. The formal complaint was limited in scope. A correction and a written acknowledgement would resolve the specific matter within policy. But I documented everything else. Every independent account. Every detail that extended beyond the formal complaint but formed part of a larger pattern. Because patterns mattered. I had been in this industry long enough to know that a pattern rarely stopped on its own. I filed the formal response. I closed the complaint. And I kept watching. Emily called and made to tell me I would not be in the bridal party. She framed it as a practical reality. Kayla, Britt, and Tara had been coordinating from the start, and adding me now would disrupt the flow. I understand, I said. Mom, please don't make it a thing. I'm not making it a thing. You're being quiet in the way you get when you're upset. I'm being quiet, I said, because I don't have anything to add.
She paused.
The wedding's still the same date. You'll be there. You just won't be in the party officially. Okay, I said. After we hung up, I was at my office. I allowed myself 30 seconds of feeling. Just 30 seconds, hands flat on the desk, eyes closed. Then I opened my next file. I was in the middle of the formal promotion evaluation cycle. Daniel's name was on the list. I was responsible for the recommendation. I was going to do it the same way I had always done it, with complete accuracy and zero personal interference. I owed that to every person in my division, including the people who worked under him, including, in ways she could not yet see, my daughter. The wedding invitations arrived in June. Emily had designed them herself. Cream cardstock, thin gold border, clean serif font. They were beautiful. I was listed in the family acknowledgement section as simply Carolyn. No relationship. No mother of the bride. Just my first name. I looked at it for a long time. Then I put it on my refrigerator with a small magnet and went about my evening. I had been a mother for 31 years. I knew my relationship to my daughter regardless of what cardstock said. I was not going to let an invitation reduce me. I was not going to call her in tears. I was not going to give that moment more power than it deserved. But I felt it.
I want to be honest about that.
I sat on my couch that night, and I felt it completely, the particular loneliness of loving someone more than they can see at a given moment. The weight of having built a whole life for someone who had started to believe she was diminishing herself by being connected to me. That was not her reasoning. That was his. I was starting to see the shape of it clearly. July came, and I stopped calling first. Not in anger. I simply stopped initiating and waited to see what happened. What happened was 2 weeks of silence. Then a brief text from Emily asking whether I had booked a hotel for the wedding weekend. I confirmed I had. She sent a thumbs up. The absence changed something. Emily had spent 31 years being able to count on me to close the gaps, to maintain the connection regardless of how little she tended it. I had stopped doing that, and she was noticing. At work, Daniel had made a significant error. A mid-sized commercial loan had flagged irregularities in the borrower's financial statements, significant enough to require escalation under our compliance protocols. Daniel had not escalated. He had approved the file forward and noted the concerns as reviewed and resolved in the system without documentation. I found out through a routine audit. The client was not yet impacted, but we had a compliance exposure that should never have existed. I felt nothing personal about it. I opened the formal review process. That was what I did. Every time, whatever I was carrying privately stayed at the door. The work required it, and I required it of myself. The compliance review took 2 weeks. I brought in our risk and legal teams. Every communication in the file was examined. Daniel was formally notified and given full opportunity to respond in writing. He explained that he had consulted informally with a colleague before noting the resolution in the system. When I reviewed the record, there was no documentation of that consultation. The colleague didn't recall being asked. The system logs showed the file had been updated only from Daniel's credentials. He had attempted to cover the error rather than escalate it. That was a compliance failure with potential regulatory consequences, not a judgment call. I documented everything with the precision I applied to every high-stakes review. I presented the findings to our compliance committee and legal counsel. The recommendation was that Daniel's promotion be paused pending a formal performance improvement process. I submitted that recommendation. Then I sat in my car in the parking garage for 10 minutes before driving home. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired and a little sad and completely certain I had done the right thing. I thought about Emily. Then I drove home, made dinner, and went to bed. The performance review I conducted with Daniel in August was the most demanding meeting of my year. He came in knowing it was connected to the compliance matter. He did not know I was certain of this, the full scope of what I had documented over the preceding months. He knew me as his fiancé's mother, which he was clearly working to manage in real time. I ran the meeting exactly as I ran every performance review. I presented the documented concerns, the compliance failure, the pattern of incomplete escalation, the multiple accounts of credit misrepresentation from the formal complaint process. I offered him the opportunity to respond to each point. He was composed. He acknowledged the compliance matter as a serious lapse and accepted responsibility in a way that sounds like acceptance while carefully limiting it. When the meeting concluded, I thanked him for his time and told him he would receive formal documentation within 5 business days. He looked at me before he left. Just for a moment. Something in that look was not the polished, composed professional who had managed the whole conversation carefully. It was something smaller. Something that understood the room had changed. Emily called that same evening. I didn't know if Daniel had told her, or if she was calling for an unrelated reason. Her instincts had always been good, even when she refused to follow them. "How are you?" she asked.
"Fine," I said.
"How are you?" A pause. "Things are a little stressful. Daniel's dealing with some work stuff." "I'm sorry to hear that. He says it'll resolve. He's confident." Another pause, shorter. "He's always confident." Something in the way she said always sat with me. Not the word. The tone. The slight flatness of it. Like she had said it too many times. "Emily," I said carefully. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mom."
Quick. Practiced.
The cadence of someone who has answered that question the same way many times. "All right," I said. "We moved the wedding date up," she said. "By 3 weeks. Some availability thing with the venue." I said that was fine, and I would adjust my arrangements. She said good.
We said goodnight.
I sat with the phone in my hand afterward. 3 weeks earlier, the compliance review was still open. Daniel would know the promotion decision was coming within that window. I did not think it was a venue availability issue. The accelerated timeline created complications, not for me. I adjusted my travel, confirmed my hotel, sent a note to Emily that everything was arranged. She replied, "Great, thanks." But the change felt deliberate. There was a version of events in which moving the wedding forward made sense. Locking things in before his professional situation created more uncertainty. Creating a context where any action I took would look, to Emily and the family, like interference at a sensitive personal moment. I was aware I could be reading into things. That awareness was important to hold. What I was less uncertain about was the financial irregularity that surfaced during the expanded audit. It was not embezzlement. What the audit found was a pattern of results reporting, internal metrics presented to leadership that had been selectively assembled. Figures reflecting his team's strongest outcomes, omitting context that would have changed their interpretation. It was the management equivalent of what I had seen in the performance files. The presentation layer looking better than the underlying reality. I flagged it through the correct channels, added it to the formal documentation. I was building a complete and accurate record. My HR business partner Cecile came to my office in late September. She laid out what they had found plainly. The selectively presented metrics were a pattern, not isolated incidents. The earliest example traced back 18 months. Each instance alone was defensible. Taken together, they described someone who had been deliberately managing the information his superiors received to maintain a perception of stronger performance than the work actually supported. "This is a career-defining finding," Cecile said. "I want to make sure we're handling it right."
We are, I said.
"His personal situation is not part of this file," I said. "Has nothing to do with this process. I want that on record." She nodded. She had been my HR partner for 4 years. She knew me. We agreed on the escalation path. The finding would go to the executive committee. The promotion was effectively dead. Depending on the committee's decision, his current role might also be at risk. I thanked Cecile, and she left. I thought about what I had documented, and I thought about Emily, and I thought about the way she had said always confident in a tone that carried something she wasn't ready to name. I was paying close attention. Emily called again the first week of October. This time the conversation was different. She had called before to perform the version of a relationship we had fallen into, surface level, managed, carefully contained. This time something underneath the performance had gotten tired of being maintained, and it was starting to show. "He gets frustrated easily lately," she said. "I keep thinking it's the pressure at work." "That's possible," I said. "But it's also, he's been like this before. When things weren't going his way, he gets very focused on controlling everything, including me." "Including you," I repeated. "I know how that sounds." Her voice shifted. "I'm not saying it's a problem. I just notice it." I had been waiting months for something like this. I had not tried to make it come. "Emily," I said carefully, "what do you notice?" A long pause. "That sometimes I feel like I need to get his permission before I have an opinion." She said it lightly, like she wasn't sure the words were worth saying out loud. But they sat between us on the phone line like something heavy and entirely true. "I'm listening," I said. I meant it completely. She pulled back, the way she always did when she had gone further than she intended. Laughed a little. Said she was tired, and probably overthinking. Said Daniel was under pressure, and she understood that. Said the wedding was going to be beautiful. I let her pull back. I didn't press. I had learned, over many years, that pushing Emily toward a truth she wasn't ready to hold only made her grip the other direction harder. But something had cracked. She had said it, that sometimes she felt she needed his permission before having an opinion. She had said it to me, which meant it had been sitting in her long enough that it needed somewhere to go. Even if she spent the next 2 weeks being bright and certain and perfectly fine, she had said it. I knew my daughter. The things she said out loud, even once, even quietly, were the things that were true. I sat with the phone after we hung up, and I thought about what she was walking toward. Not with dread exactly, with the particular grief that comes from watching someone you love nearly see something clearly, and then look away. She wasn't ready, but she was closer. The executive committee met on a Tuesday in late October. I presented the full documented record, the complaint resolution, the compliance failure, the metric misrepresentation pattern, the performance review findings. I laid it out factually and completely, with every piece of supporting documentation attached and organized. The committee deliberated. I was not in the room for that portion. When I was called back in, the decision was what I had expected. Daniel's promotion was formally denied. Given the compliance failure and the documented pattern of misrepresentation, his current role would be placed under a formal performance improvement plan. If the plan was not successfully completed within 90 days, his continued employment would be reviewed. It was a serious outcome. Not a firing, not yet, but something that changed the shape of everything. I drove home that afternoon thinking about the wedding, which was now 3 weeks away. I had done nothing wrong. Every process had run correctly. Every decision had been documented, reviewed by HR and legal, and handled through proper channels without one moment of personal interference. Whatever happened next was not something I had caused. It was something that had always been there, waiting to surface. The wedding was held on a Saturday in mid-November at an estate venue outside the city. I arrived alone, in a simple navy dress. I found my seat in the third row, where Emily had arranged for me to sit. Not the front, not beside family. The third row. I sat down and looked at the flowers and candles and thought, she did this. Whatever else has happened, she made something lovely. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock. By 1:45, Daniel had not appeared at the altar. At 1:50, I could see the wedding coordinator moving with a different kind of urgency. A murmur moved through the seated guests. Emily's bridesmaids were clustered near the anteroom entrance, Kayla scanning the room with an expression working hard to look calm. At 1:55, I heard the coordinator say quietly to an usher, "He's taking a call. He needs a few minutes." I knew which call it was. He had received formal written notification of the executive committee's decision that morning. HR's process. The system working as it was supposed to. I sat in the third row. I did not move. I did not go to her. I simply waited. Emily found me after. Nearly an hour of controlled chaos came first. Daniel had gone very pale. He and Emily spoke privately in the anteroom for 30 minutes while the bridesmaids hovered outside and guests sat in rows of confused, careful silence. The caterers held food in warming trays that nobody was eating. I stayed in my third row seat. Going to her was not my role in that moment, and I knew it. When she came, she had been crying, the quiet, steady kind. The kind that means something fundamental has rearranged itself and cannot go back. She sat beside me and said nothing for a long moment. "He told me about work," she said finally. "The compliance thing. What they found." "Okay," I said. "He said your name, that you ran the process." "I did. Along with HR, legal, and the executive committee." "You never told me." "I couldn't," I said. "And I wouldn't have." She looked at her hands. The flowers were still everywhere. The candles still burning. "Mom." Her voice broke slightly. "He's been controlling me. I don't know for how long." I reached over and held her hand. I didn't say anything. I just held it. The wedding was postponed that afternoon. Emily made the announcement herself, chin up, voice steady, standing at the entrance to the ceremony room. It reminded me of herself at 7, arguing with her teacher, certain of what she knew. In the weeks that followed, what she had been holding came out slowly. The way he had managed her opinions. The job she hadn't applied for because he discouraged her until the deadline passed. The friends she had drifted from. Daniel left the company within 60 days. The performance improvement plan was not completed. I had no involvement in his departure beyond the documentation already on file. Emily and I had dinner in December, just the two of us. She apologized, not perfectly. There were things she wasn't ready to examine. But she looked at me and said, "You are protecting me," and I couldn't see it. I told her I hadn't been trying to protect her. I had been doing my job. The protection was a consequence. That night, I drove home with the radio on. And the last thing I thought before falling asleep was simple. He had thought I was just her embarrassing mother. He never understood I had been quietly protecting her the entire time. Even from him,